Hey pilots, Craig Gamma with Paraglider Service USA, and today we're going to go over line fitting. So you've mail ordered a line, you're going to install it yourself to save some money instead of sending it in the shop. So let's get to it and show you how to go about that. So the first step you're going to do is you're going to lay out half your glider, whether it be your living room or your garage. Any place you can open it, preferably indoors so you don't have to deal with wind. And the next step you're going to do, well, let's say hypothetically before I get into the next step, is that it's a C line, a main C line that we're going to replace, or a midline, and we'll go over that because that's a little more complicated than the A's and the B's here. So the next step you want to do is elevate the A and B rows, get them out of the way. To do that, you need to elevate your risers. So you can have them high on the top of a door if it's inside the house, secure, or in this case, as you can see what I've done here. Get them up high, glider laid out in reverse launch position, and the A and B rows are going to be elevated and secured. So those lines are up off the C row. The brake lines, I'll take them and I'll stow them off to the side. And I usually just tape them so that they're at a completely different angle than the other lines. So the A and B rows are up high. The C row is going to be going this direction, and the brake lines are going this direction. So the less likelihood of any tanglements, because it's so easy to tangle lines. So a thing to keep in mind when you're replacing lines is that there's two different theologies here, and that is you match the existing line on the opposite side, and that way you have the symmetry there. But if your glider's over 100, 150 hours, you know, these lines have shrunk. If it's Dyneema main lines, they've shrunk 50. At 50 hours, they've already have a noticeable amount of shrinkage. And if they're aramid lines, it's about 100 hours, they have a noticeable amount of shrinkage. And so I always propose, not to discount the other method, is to replace all lines with factory lengths and then fit them accordingly. Adjust them down, fit them is what I call that, to match. And that way you have some flexibility down the road for trim tuning. I trim tune gliders for a living, so I'm always looking from that perspective. So there's nothing wrong with the other method. It's just what happens is you put a new line in, it hasn't gone through its shrinkage process. Now in the next 50 to 100 hours, it's going to go through its shrinkage process. Now it's going to be, their lines have already stabilized. They've gone through their initial surge of shrinkage. They're still shrinking, but at a slower pace. But the new line is going through its initial surge, and now it's going to be way shorter than the existing lines because you've matched it to the existing lines. And that line is going to have to be replaced in 50 to 100 hours. So to eliminate that potential of having to replace a line you've replaced, I mean, it's a new line, it's been a replacement line, and now you got to replace it again, I say go factory length. Go factory length, it's going to be a little bit longer, and you just adjust it down with some loops at the riser. There's 4 different loops I'm proposing. I'll attach this picture of this video. You have a double loop, lark's foot, pile hitch, and pile hitch plus. You know, I got 8 other loops to use, but these are the simplest ones to do. This one's about 10 millimeters shortage. The lark's foot's about 13. Pile hitch is about 15, and the pile hitch plus is about 20. Of course, it's going to vary because the thickness of the mullions vary as well as the thickness of the lines. So it's a trial and error thing, but you get the gist of it. There's ways to go about to shorten these lines. So let's say we're going to place C2 here. So what I want to do is I always take my hand like this, and I have it C1, C2, C3. There's the center gliders here, wingtips there, and I run them down the whole length as far as I can to the glider. Hopefully you can see this, to the trailing edge, and then I grab them and pull them back and see if that's the layout that I have at the mullion is at the right, at the ring. So C1, C2, 3. So this is my way of affirm that these aren't crisscrossed up here. Then I pull it back. Okay, so we're gonna replace this midline. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna undo this line. I've already unsecured it, so it's not really loose like it. And then see my O-rings, I don't do the double loop here and then tension and double loop there because it rubs the lines. I always do a smaller O-ring and just go over just like this. That way they won't descend down when the risers are up, and they won't be a potential of braiding the lines because they're not right against it tightly. That's just my personal preference. Aside from that side note, let's go on. And so we're going to replace this midline. And let's say this is the damaged line. I'm going to take the new line and put it right adjacent to it. But when the C1 line, I'm going to have to get it out of the way. I don't take it off. I just make a lark's foot and secure it on the nut above. That way we keep our sequencing right. I've never take a line off it unless it's the one I'm replacing. So I'll hook the other new line on it, and then I'll run them side by side. Let's say I've done that. And I run it all the way down as far as I can here, because I want to compare their lengths, okay? So I'm gonna run them down. You know, what I do here in the shop is I actually measure them on the floor here and have them under 5 kilograms of tension and get them right to the gnat's ass. But in your case, it's not that critical. You're gonna pull them side by side, about 11 pounds, 5 kilograms of pressure, okay? And you see the new line's longer by 10 millimeters, so we're gonna add a double loop at the million to equal them out. If it's 13 millimeters, the anchor stitch, you know. And you can put the loop in it and compare it and keep changing the loop up there until they're equal. Because, you know, it's not going to be exactly 10 millimeters, 13 millimeters, you know, as far as the chart goes. Because, like I was saying, the diameters of lines and millions vary. So, once you've determined which loop you're going to use, now we're going to go ahead and replace that line. If you don't trip over the lines, it's so easy to do. I know, I do it all the time. So anyhow, so we're gonna take this line off. It's got a double loop here, and I've had the new one we put on here, we determined it needs a double loop to match it. But when we put it on, the new one that we put on here, we're always gonna match whatever loop's here, so that we're comparing apples to apples. If I put a single loop on here with the new one and my existing one has a double loop, well, I'm not comparing apples to apples. So, you know, mimic the loop and then add accordingly. So if I had a double loop here and I put a double loop on and I went over there and the new line is longer, then obviously I have to go to the next stage, to the lark's foot or the pile H or the pile H plus. Hope you follow me there. So just some, you know, some variables to keep in mind. So now I'm going to take this line off and replace it. C2, C1's up, stowed away, C3's off to the side. So let's go down here and replace this line. And I usually have a tape here. Where'd I put it? Oh, there it is. Let me show you what I do here. And so here the brake lines are going that direction. This is C1, C3, and then get these in the right order, the 2 branch lines. And keep in mind that gliders have a direction that they stow these. For the most part, the center of the wing to the wingtip, they're going to run it that direction. 90% of the manufacturers that way, but when you pull this apart, you can see which way it was done. In this case, it was done from the wingtip to the center of the wing, so you want to mimic that when you put the new one on back on. Hopefully I was in camera view here. So let's go back, in case I wasn't in camera view. As I was telling you, you got these laid out right. There's a direction they go, and 9 times out of 10, the manufacturers will go from the center of the wing towards the wingtip. In this case, it went from the wingtip to the center. Just mimic the way you take it off is the way you're going to put the new one on. Keep this order right. Slide this down, keep these two on the right, pull it off. And what I do normally is I tape these down because I don't want to lose the sequence. Now I'll get the new line, discard the old one aside, I'll put the new one on. In this case, we went from wingtip to center, so we'll put the loop that direction, and that way the other end is going to go from the wingtip to the center of the wing. The reality was this manufacturer goes the opposite direction, and this was installed wrong, because I know from, so we're gonna do it the right way. So we're going from the center of the wing to the wing tip. So what direction we're putting these in? Center to the wing tip. Hopefully I'm in camera view here. Pull this through. Bring this down. And then we gotta cinch them in the right order. So the way I do that is just look closely, and because you don't want these to cross, you want these two loops to stay together. I mean, to be stacked appropriately. So this one goes first, cinch it, and this one will butt up against it. And then I'll give them a good, no crossing. Perfect, okay. Now we're gonna run this back to the risers. As we know, C1 is tied up straight away, C3 is that way. So we've reduced the potential of line tangling by keeping things set up like they are. And then we determined this was going to be a double loop, and so we'll put a double loop on there. In my case, this glider didn't have it that way, but you know what I'm talking about. And then I'll put this one back on, C1. So loosen it off here. I don't want to drop it if all possible. And this one was outfitted originally with a double loop. So I'll make it back a double loop. You want the loop to be in between the outer boundaries, not off to the side, but in between. And then, you know, hypothetically, we put a double loop there on the replacement line, even though this glider didn't have it that way. And then put it all ring on, and then we'll cinch this thing back up. And then I got my wrench, and I'll tighten this thing up later. But just so you know how I've done it. Now, if we're going to do a midline, it's same procedure. We're just going a stage further. So we would have taken it apart to here, and then I would have taped this line off to the side. These two would have been free. And let's say hypothetically, the midline you're replacing is this one. And I would tape those two down when I loosen that up. And let's say this line is, the new line's about a little bit longer. You don't need to worry about it. It's because, you know, we have a tolerance of plus or minus 10 millimeter from the wing to the risers. Or you could go ahead and put a double loop here. And, you know, so right here, see how I have a single loop? When it runs through, this would be a double loop or a lark's foot here before it runs through the lines. And that's what you would do in the scenario here if you wanted to shorten midlines or an upper line. But that just kind of gives you an idea if you were doing that scenario. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me. My phone number's on my order page at the bottom and on my website, or you can just fill out the contact form of paragliderserviceusa.com. So hopefully that'll get you all in straights here, set up on how to do line fitting, and safe flights out there and safe landings. Talk to you all later.